I was never the type of person who expected much recognition from my family. I've always been more about doing my things quietly, without fanfare, without expecting applause or congratulations. But that day, for the first time in a long while, I thought things would be different. I had just been promoted to manager at work after years of grinding in silence, often swallowing my pride with bosses, working late, and watching others get recognized before me. When I got the news, it felt like a knot in my throat. I remembered everything I'd been through, and for the first time, I thought, maybe now they'll be proud of me. So when my parents said they were going to host a dinner at home to celebrate my achievement, I thought maybe, just maybe, this would be my moment. I arrived that night with my heart both tight and hopeful. I picked my outfit carefully, brought a dessert I knew everyone liked, and even wrote a small speech. Nothing over the top, just a few sincere words to thank them and share that victory. When I got there, my sister was already there, freshly divorced, sitting on the couch with the face of someone who had just been crying, being hugged by my mother like a child. I understood truly. Her divorce had been rough, and I knew she was suffering. But there, in that moment, everything shifted. The dinner, which was supposed to celebrate my promotion, turned into a collective therapy session about her pain, and me, who thought I'd finally be seen, slowly faded into the background at that table. As the food was served, I smiled mechanically, trying not to show the mix of frustration and disappointment eating me up inside. Every time someone started a conversation, it was to ask how my sister was handling the divorce, if she had managed to sleep, if she was eating properly, and she, with that hollow look, made sure to feed the pity party. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying she was faking it. She was genuinely struggling. That much was obvious. But what hurt was realizing that, once again, I was being pushed to the back of the room while everyone crowded around her. I didn't even get a chance to talk about my promotion. No one asked. No one mentioned it. And then I started wondering, did they even remember the reason for this dinner? Or had it just become another night where her feelings mattered more than mine? I looked around the table and saw my father chuckling softly at some story she told about her ex-husband. My mother served her as if she were made of glass about to shatter. My aunts, uncles, and cousins, who had come to celebrate my achievement, could only repeat how much of a jerk the guy was and how she deserved better. I felt like an extra in my own moment. I remember gripping my napkin under the table so hard that later, I found the marks of my fingers on it. And when my mother finally raised her glass for a toast, I thought this would be my time. But she raised it for my sister. To this incredible woman who's bravely picking herself up after everything she's been through. To this woman. My name wasn't even mentioned. I smiled, raised my glass too, and inside, I fell apart. That's when I realized, either I spoke up or I'd swallow that pain once again, and I couldn't take it anymore. I took a deep breath and set my fork aside, like someone who's decided they've had enough to eat. But really, I was just trying to organize the chaos in my head. My heart was pounding, and it wasn't from nerves. It was pure anger, an old, accumulated anger I'd spent my whole life trying to hide with good humor, politeness, silence. But that day, watching everyone there vibing with my sister's pain while ignoring my achievement, I couldn't stay quiet anymore. I started slowly, said I wanted to say something. No one paid much attention at first, but when they noticed the tone of my voice, their eyes gradually turned to me. My parents stopped smiling. My sister widened her eyes, as if I'd done something outrageous just by wanting to speak, and I spoke. My voice was steady, but trembling inside. I said I felt invisible in that family, that I knew my sister needed support. No one was denying that, least of all me. But that dinner was supposed to celebrate my victory, an achievement I'd sweated for, and no one had even mentioned it. I told them I'd prepared a small speech, that I'd arrived excited to share that moment with the people who mattered most to me, and that, once again, I'd been pushed aside, like always, since childhood. I said I was tired of being the daughter who never caused trouble and was therefore forgotten, the one who got good grades, landed a good job, paid her bills, took care of everything, but never heard "we're proud of you." I looked into my mother's and father's eyes as I said this. There was no anger in my voice, just pain, exhaustion. The silence that fell over the table was heavy. No one knew where to look, and for the first time I didn't care. I kept talking, said I'd always understood the role they'd assigned me, the strong daughter, the one who could handle everything, who never complained, who held things together. But that didn't mean I didn't feel, that I didn't need affection, recognition, to be seen. I told them that for years I'd swallowed my pride, because I thought being independent and successful was reward enough, but it wasn't. Because deep down, I just wanted to hear from them that I'd done something worth noticing, that my struggle, even in silence, was also valid. And there, with everyone watching, I laid bare years of pent-up silence. I brought up old situations, moments they probably didn't even remember, but I'd never forgotten. Like when I won my first scholarship, and the celebration was canceled because my sister had fought with her boyfriend, or when I bought my first car with my own money, and no one even wanted to see it because she was sad about work. I saw a mix of shock and guilt on their faces, and that, as cruel as it may sound, gave me a relief I didn't even know I needed. I needed them to feel that, even if just for a few minutes. My sister tried to interrupt, started saying I was exaggerating, that it was unfair to bring this up right now, but I kept going. I said the problem was never her being in pain. It was the fact that every time she was in pain, my existence stopped mattering. I said I was tired of staying quiet to avoid being seen as selfish, when all I'd ever wanted was a little space. Not her. Space. Mine. A space I'd earned with effort, work, hard choices. And at that dinner, once again, that space was denied to me. But this time, I chose not to accept it. I remember exactly the sound the silverware made when my aunt set hers down on the plate. It was like breaking a spell. Everyone finally understood I wasn't speaking out of impulse or pettiness or jealousy. It was pain. Old pain. And the craziest part is that, as I spoke, I didn't cry. I was so tired of holding everything in that. In that moment, tears seemed small compared to what I was feeling. It was like I'd spent years holding my breath and was finally letting it out. For the first time, I was saying everything I'd always wanted to say. I looked at my mother and told her it hurt to realize the only way to be noticed in that house was to be broken, that only if I were at rock bottom, maybe someone would look at me with the same care they gave my sister, and that I didn't want that. I didn't want to have to destroy myself to be loved. My mother lowered her eyes. Her face turned red. And then, only then, I felt like maybe, for the first time, she had truly listened. My father rubbed his beard, the way he always does when he doesn't know how to react, and no one said anything. My sister got up from the table and went to her room, and honestly, in that moment I didn't care. I'd spent my whole life making space for her, always trying not to shine too bright so I wouldn't overshadow anyone, always being the good girl, the responsible one, the one who endured everything in silence. But that day, I realized it was only hurting me, that instead of admiring me for it, they'd just gotten used to ignoring me. And as hard as it was to speak up at that dinner, it was liberating, because for the first time, I spoke for myself, and I heard myself too. After my sister left the table, the atmosphere became heavy in a way that's hard to describe. No one really knew how to react, and I didn't know what to expect. From then on, the truth is, I hadn't said all that expecting applause, much less immediate remorse. I'd said it because I couldn't swallow it anymore. But even so, I sat there in silence, feeling the weight of what I'd just done. The dinner kind of died there. No one really ate much after that, and conversation fizzled out. All those people who had been talking nonstop before were now exchanging quick glances, as if waiting for someone to get up so they could leave without seeming rude. The dessert I'd brought never even made it out of the fridge, and that's when it hit me. For so long, I'd adapted to the discomfort of not being seen, but now I was feeling a new discomfort, the kind that comes after finally saying everything and not knowing what comes next. Deep down, I already knew that moment would change things. Maybe not in the ideal way, maybe not with hugs and apologies, but still, I knew nothing would be the same after that. When the dinner ended, I went to the kitchen. Myself took the dessert tray and put it back in my thermal bag. I didn't even look at anyone, not out of pride, but because I was emotionally drained. My father tried to approach me at the door, gave me an awkward pat on the shoulder, his usual gesture, like he was saying, "I heard you," without having to speak. I just nodded and left. In the car on the way home, I cried. I cried everything I hadn't cried at the table. It was a mixed cry: sadness, relief, anger, exhaustion. But there was also a hint of pride in there, because for the first time in a long time, I had chosen myself. I had let my pain out without fear of disappointing anyone. In the days that followed, the tension in the family was palpable. I knew things had changed, but I had no idea how much. My father, usually reserved and conflict avoidant, sent me a message. It just said he understood what I meant, but that my sister was still going through a tough time, and I should be more patient. His words were kind, but this message hit me strangely. More patient? I'd been patient my whole life. The truth was, I wasn't asking for more patience. I was asking to be seen. But the hardest part was her silence. My sister didn't talk to me for days. I even tried texting her to ask if she was okay, but she replied curtly and emotionlessly, "Yes, I'm fine. I just need space." That hurt more than anything. There I was, open, exposing a pain that had been consuming me for years, and her response was, "Space?" I didn't know how to deal with that. What hurt the most was realizing that no matter how much I'd spoken my truth, I was still seen as the difficult one, the one who had to wait for others' timing, not the one who deserved her own. But at the same time, I knew I couldn't go back. I couldn't stay quiet again. Something inside me had broken, and even if family relationships were now strained, I felt more whole. I'd spent years being the person who swallowed everything, who adapted to others, who patiently waited to be recognized. But that day, that conversation, showed me I had a voice, and it didn't matter if anyone liked what I said. What mattered was that I'd finally spoken. And that, as painful as it was, also gave me strength. Over time, the dust settled. Things didn't go back to how they were, but there was a small shift. My sister started texting me occasionally. Not warm messages, but it was something. She told me she was trying to understand what I'd said and needed time to process it. I'd never asked for that time, but at least now she was acknowledging that my words hadn't come out of nowhere. I started noticing that, as much as my courage had caused a rift, it had also made my family look at the dynamic that had formed over the years. And when my mother reached out almost a week later to talk about what I'd said, I knew things were changing. She spoke softly, almost ashamed, saying maybe she'd never given me the recognition I deserved, but now she understood how much it had hurt me. She apologized, simply but sincerely, in a way I never thought I'd hear. I stayed silent for a few seconds, absorbing the weight of those words. I don't know if she truly understood everything I felt, but in that moment, I felt a different kind of lightness. Even if my relationship with my sister was still distant, and my father hadn't said much beyond what he already had, I felt relief. I wasn't swallowing my needs, my pain, waiting for someone to notice them on their own anymore. I had spoken, and as long as the healing process would take, that was already a huge step. I didn't know what the future held for my family, or how things would adjust after that night. But one thing was clear: I wasn't afraid to be myself anymore. I wasn't afraid to express what I felt, to occupy the space I deserved, to demand to be seen. Maybe, with time, my family would learn to see me too. And if they didn't, I knew that at least I'd given myself the chance to be heard. Over time, I realized the change wouldn't be quick. It wouldn't be how I'd imagined, with everyone hugging me and putting me in the spotlight. That wasn't what I needed. I didn't need a grand celebration or instant forgiveness. What I needed was to know my voice had finally been heard. And that process, of being seen, of allowing myself to be who I am, extended to other areas of my life. I started standing up for myself more at work, valuing my time and achievements without fear of seeming arrogant. Slowly, the weight I'd carried regarding my family lessened. That's not to say things were perfect or that everyone was in harmony. They weren't. But in some way, that had been a turning point for me. I realized I had the power to change the dynamics that hurt me. That didn't mean everyone had to like my change, or that the whole family would support me. But it meant I was making the right choices for myself. And that, in a way, gave me peace. There were still hard moments, of course. Tense conversations with my sister, awkward silences with my father. But the weight wasn't the same. I knew change wouldn't be easy, and everyone's acceptance wouldn't come all at once. But what I felt now was a strength I hadn't had before. I no longer needed everyone around me all the time. I just needed myself. And as painful as it was to see my sister still dealing with her divorce, I understood she also needed her space and time. I didn't blame her, but now I knew I wouldn't be the one taking a back seat anymore. I allowed myself to own my journey without asking for permission. I learned, the hard way, that people might not understand our pain right away, but when we finally stand up for ourselves, no matter how long the process takes, we're carving a path that's ours alone. A few weeks later, I could look at everything more clearly. My sister, still recovering from her divorce, started reaching out more often, but now the conversations were different. They weren't just about her and what was happening in her life. Things felt more balanced. And interestingly, it was through this shift that we built a new, more mature connection. Not that everything was perfect, but she began to understand that sometimes just listening is a huge support. She finally stopped seeing my pain as something unworthy of acknowledgement and started recognizing that I had feelings, needs, and, most importantly, my own life. It didn't happen overnight, of course, but little by little, she learned to see me, and I learned to be there for her without forgetting myself. Of course, there were moments of frustration, days when I felt my voice hadn't been heard enough, like something was still missing. But through it all, I learned that my own recognition no longer depends on anyone else. By opening up, by letting everything out that night, I didn't just make my family see something they'd never seen in me. I also started seeing myself differently. I matter. I am visible. I deserve respect. Before, I'd constantly sought that recognition, but now I knew that even if no one gave it to me, I could give it to myself. I'm not saying I'm completely healed, or that everything is resolved, but the simple act of allowing myself to speak my truth was an essential step. Now I feel stronger, more whole, and if, in the future, my family still doesn't see me the way I deserve, I know the most important thing has already happened. I saw myself. The most important thing of all is that now I understand change doesn't come from a single conversation, but from the accumulated impact of small gestures and decisions. It's not an instant transformation, and things didn't suddenly become perfect. Family relationships still have their ups and downs, but now there's something new in the air. Respect. Respect for myself and respect from others. Sometimes when I look at my mother or sister, I see they're still trying to process what happened. Maybe they don't fully understand why I exploded like that, but now I see that's irrelevant. What matters is that I learned to put myself first. I learned that being heard isn't a favor, it's a right. And that lesson, as painful as it was, stays with me every day. I know that, deep down, everyone expected our family dynamic to go back to normal, but what I realize now is that normal was never healthy for me. I was always the one who gave way, who made space, who expected others to notice my needs without me having to ask. But the truth is, that never worked. Normal only made me feel invisible and suffocated. Now, I see that the real breakthrough wasn't just speaking up at that dinner. It was accepting that the path to emotional self-sufficiency is long and hard. And no, I'm not saying I'm perfect now. Far from it. I still have my insecurities, my days when frustration hits hard. But what's truly changed is that now I know my worth. And more importantly, I'm learning to live for myself, unafraid to be the priority of my own life. I still catch myself thinking about that night, wondering how things might have been different if I'd spoken up sooner, if I'd stood my ground, said what I'd been holding back, demanded to be seen. I won't lie. Sometimes I feel sad that I waited so long, that I let others dictate my limits. But at the same time, I'm proud I found the courage to speak. I know that by doing so, I changed not just the course of my life, but also my family's. Not in some grand, dramatically transformative way, but in a way that maybe not everyone sees yet. I changed how I see myself, and in a way, that was all I needed. I chose myself. I recognized myself, and that brought me an inner peace I never imagined I'd experience. No matter what others say, or how things unfold from here, what matters is that, finally, I know who I am, what I deserve, and that I have the right to occupy the space I'm worthy of. Today, my family still doesn't fully understand. Some things are still unresolved, and feelings are still a little messy. But the bigger truth is that I don't need their approval to be happy. I've learned that when we give ourselves the chance to be heard, It's not just others who see us. More importantly, we see ourselves. And that, as simple as it sounds, is the foundation of any real breakthrough. Looking back, I see that the biggest obstacle wasn't my family or what they thought of me. The biggest obstacle was me, my own struggle to believe I had the right to be heard, to be seen, to be respected. Now, I understand that the hardest battle I had to fight was against the fear of rejection for expressing my truth. And in the end, it doesn't matter if everyone understood or not. I understood. And that, in itself, is already a huge victory. When I look at the person I was before that night and the person I am now, I see a significant difference. I'm not the same at all. I grew. I matured. I realize my journey doesn't depend on others' acceptance. I am enough. And in the end, that's the biggest lesson I could take from this experience. No matter how long it takes, or how many obstacles still lie ahead, I've learned to respect myself, to give myself the value I deserve. And that, as simple as it may seem, was the key to my real breakthrough. It wasn't about others' forgiveness or recognition. It was about giving myself the chance to be who I am, unafraid, unreserved. And in the end, that's true freedom. If this story hit you in any way, don't leave without subscribing to the channel. There's so much more coming. Real stories of resilience, unexpected turns, and inner strength. Like the video, share it with someone who needs to hear this, and drop a comment telling us how it made you feel. Your support helps this content reach more people who need the strength to rise again.